which questions were going to be asked. And I think 3 million people voted, or 3.5 million people voted. I have to say that there was one question that was voted on that ranked fairly high, and that was whether legalizing marijuana would improve the economy and job creation. And I don't know what this says about the online audience, but I just want, I don't want people to think that this was a fairly popular question. We want to make sure that it was answered. The answer is no, I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So,
he's a Harvard economics professor and a frequent guest on this program, but we've never had him on, at least as far as I can recall, to talk about drugs. Here's why we're doing this now. He's written a book where he explains what legalizing drugs would save our economy. You ready for the number? $77 billion a year. For comparison, that's the figure that Bernie Madoff admits to bilking investors out of in his Ponzi scheme so they could be all paid back with one quick swoop. Or it's also the 2-year state budget just passed by the state of Wyoming. That means they run their state for 2 years with that money. Professor Myron, thanks so much for being with us, sir.
Nice to be back here.
Break it down for us. You know, we got that figure of 77 million from you. How did you get to 77 billion?
Well, you would get about 44 billion by not spending the money we're currently spending on police for arrests, on judges and prosecutors for all the trials, for prisons and prison guards, etc., for the incarcerations. And you get another 33 or so billion by collecting tax revenue on legal drugs in the same way we collect lots of tax revenue on cigarettes and alcohol. So it's a combination of those two things, and that number puts together the state and the federal, but it gets you what used to be thought of as a big number, although these days it doesn't sound so impressive.
Not post Bernie Madoff.
No.
But, you know, some people would say, you know, we make a lot of money by incarcerating these people. We've got people in prisons, and that's part of the economy as well. And would we have to lose the jobs of all these guys who are part of the DEA and police officers fighting on the border? Why would you want to eliminate those jobs?
Well, we don't want to create jobs by forbidding something that people can use responsibly. That argument would say we should go back to criminalizing alcohol. It would say we should criminalize food, because after all, if we made food illegal, there'd be billions and billions of people violating the law every day, and we could hire zillions of police to enforce those laws. So that's just not a very effective argument.
It sounds like what you're saying is that we are almost at the same place today where we were back during Prohibition. That we've got a problem, and the best way of solving it would be of getting rid of the Prohibition vis-a-vis alcohol.
Absolutely. And of course, it turns out that one of the reasons that the nation came to its senses in 1933 was because of a big economic downturn, the Great Depression, and they realized that they wanted more tax revenue, and legalizing alcohol again was one way to do it. Now, that's not the only reason to legalize. It's much more important that legalization would, for example, get rid of all the violence in Mexico that we've been observing recently.
You know, it's interesting. Kurlikowski, that potential drug czar that we were just showing there, he's one of the few police chiefs who's actually tried to not decriminalize it legally, but make it so that it's like, you know, maybe a slap on the wrist. Yesterday, on the other hand, we were doing a story about some folks in Texas who were putting people in jails for a long time for just having paraphernalia, a pipe, not even the actual substance itself, in their car. So on one side of the country, we have the law being treated one way. On another side of the country, we've got the law being treated completely differently. It's like a piecemeal approach. Is that part of the problem?
Well, that's a part of the problem, but I think there's a more fundamental problem, which is that the law just doesn't make sense. For something that is potentially dangerous, there might be a reason to regulate it. There might be a reason to tax it. That's exactly what we do with alcohol and cigarettes. But we leave them as legal goods because that way we avoid having the underground markets that create corruption, that create violence, that redistribute income to criminals, and a whole set of negative ancillary effects.
Fascinating. What kind of reaction? I mean, you're a Harvard professor. You're not supposed to be writing about stuff like this. I mean, people are going to think you're a stoner or something. I mean, what kind of reaction have you gotten from this, and do you think it'll ever fly?
From economists, I get a lot of very positive response. Economists think about unintended consequences and recognize that a lot of these negative effects we attribute to drugs are due to drug prohibition. Politicians don't want to touch it because it doesn't seem to be politically viable right now, and that's the problem.
That's interesting. Man, I'll tell you what, interesting discussion. I'm glad we did this. Professor, thank you for being with us, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I think it's a mess. It's outrageous. I think we're getting carried away with the whole war on drugs. That's how silly the whole thing gets. Drugs are very dangerous, but there's a lot of things that's very dangerous. The question is who should regulate danger? Should we assume responsibility for ourselves, or should the government take care of us? And I don't believe in the nanny state. If you do have regulations and laws, they should be at the state level, not at the federal level. We didn't even have a federal law up until 1937, and here we are. We have spent hundreds of billions of dollars in a very unsuccessful attempt to regulate drugs, and you have all these weird examples. That's one example you mentioned, but what about a sick person dying with cancer, goes out and uses marijuana when it was legalized in a particular state like California, and the feds come in and arrest them? I mean, there's so much violation there of common decency and the Constitution, and it makes no sense. The drug war is a total failure, and the federal drug war ought to be revisited and for the most part gotten rid of. If you're a consistent person and you think the government should be regulating personal behavior, you have to be for prohibition of alcohol. And when you look back and throughout history and what happened to that was a total disaster. It created the Al Capones. And right now today, there is so much violence today, not because people use drugs, but because they're illegal. That's why, you know, the people who benefit the most by all these laws, these are the drug cartels. They lobby to keep these laws in place because they can't exist without them. You don't have the Al Capones now because you don't have prohibition of alcohol. Prohibition is what is bad. And this does not mean we endorse personal behavior that is not beneficial. It just means who regulates personal behavior, and it shouldn't be the state. There's no benefits to it. It's just like regulating church behavior or religious behavior of any sort. So I see no purpose in doing this. I understand there's a few people who smoke marijuana already. What is so bad is the war on marijuana, putting people in prison. They can be caught using drugs for the third time, never committing a violent act, and putting them in prison for life, and yet rapists and murderers can get out. And if you think of all that expenses, you're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars that get spent on this, and people usually who get sent to prison for nonviolent drug use come out as violent criminals. So it makes no sense at all to pursue this method. We have people in Washington, D.C. who drink a lot of alcohol, let me tell you. Because of political reasons, they're scared to death to vote to legalize the growing of hemp. Hemp has nothing to do with smoking marijuana. And because of this obsession on the drug war, we can't grow hemp in this country. We send the hemp growing up to Canada, then we buy the products that we make from hemp. So we export our jobs to Canada. Hemp is a good product that we prohibit from being used, and it was legal up until even after World War II. We were allowed to raise hemp in this country. This is how hysterical this war on drugs has gotten. So the sooner we come to this realization, someday, actually I'm optimistic about this. I think this country is going to wake up like they did in the 30s and say, hey, you know, prohibition didn't work. Get rid of the prohibition. Let the regulation go back to the state. Regulate it like alcohol. I want to go back to a previous time prior to 1937 when the states did the regulating. And I don't advocate giving marijuana to 10-year-olds walking in the store. But the kids now can get more marijuana with all these laws easier than they can get alcohol.
The answer is no. I don't think that is a good strategy to grow our economy. So